Okay. So things that can cause self-sabotage then. So we've covered a few of them already, but it can be from our thinking or even overthinking. It can be beliefs that we've had that we hold on to, and quite often our beliefs are formed when we were children, and we generally carry those into adulthood, but they can appear at any point in your life. It could be your upbringing, which can relate to beliefs, but it could even be as simple as something like if you want to go to university, for example, and nobody in your family's ever been to university, you could think it's not possible for you to do that because no one's ever done it before you. So that could hold you back. It could be emotions that are stopping you get what you want. I've had a client recently who, anytime she was talking about herself in an interview or with her work colleagues, she'd just burst into tears because she just found it far too overwhelming, because she got so many self-doubts about herself to actually talk about herself without feeling emotional. So she'd get an overwhelm of fear, an overwhelm of sadness and hurt, and she'd just cry. So because of that, she was avoiding situations. So even emotions can stop you. Also something called imposter syndrome. I know that's a phrase that's bandied around quite a lot, and that I know that's something that I experienced in the workplace, that so many self-doubts about myself and was worried about being found out for being an imposter, that I'd basically tie myself in knots and just be anxious on a daily basis when I was in work. And there's and quite often tied in with that is we have a belief of what we think other people are thinking about us, that we're worried about being judged by other people, and quite often we end up mind reading what we think other people are going to think about us. And there's a quote that I like that kind of helps sum this up. So there's a guy called Charles Cooley, I'm going to have to read this because I can never remember it, who gave a quote, and you might need to think about this while I read it. So I'm not who you think I am, and I'm not who I think I am, but I am who I think you think I am. So that might have tied a few people's brains in knots, so I'll just read it again. I'm not who you think I am, and I'm not who I think I am. I am who you think I am. Sorry, I am who I think you think I am. See, it's a bit of a tongue twister. But basically all that means is that when you're assuming what somebody else is thinking about you, you're making an assumption about them that they're making an assumption about you. So you're basically living in a perception of a perception. So I was just hoping that sort of break things down a little bit for people to understand that when you're assuming somebody's thinking something about you, that it can feel very real, but it's actually not. Does that help anybody?
Yeah.
Victoria, you've had your hand up.
Just going to say there's a book called The 4 Agreements, and one of the agreements that you make is that you don't make assumptions about other people's perceptions, and it gives you lots of strategies about we have those assumptions and where they come from. And I just think what you said was really interesting, because a lot of people have got very similar sort of self-sabotage, imposter syndrome. We can really tie into that, and I think just wanted to echo the points that have already been made, but the book The 4 Agreements is really useful for that, and having that agreement with each other, particularly in relationships and with people that you care about, is that you don't assume things from them. And it's a bit like I get the quote wrong, but if you make an assumption, you make an ass out of you type stuff. But it's like that's exactly hitting the nail on the head, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've not actually read The 4 Agreements, but I've heard about it, so I need to add it to my list. But thank you for sharing that. Definitely agree with that. And Nicole?
It just took me a long time to realise, and the more you listen out for these things, the more you spot it, is that all the judgments or all of the things that people say often are just opinions. So you hear things all the time, and sometimes you adopt them and you take them as truth, or you take them as, oh, it's like that, but actually they're just opinions. And so I've just learnt some techniques to reply to people, say thank you for that, but not necessarily take it inwards.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's not necessarily the huge truth, is it, really? And the more you listen, the more you realize how many of those things are coming at you. I didn't realize how many of those things are constantly flying at you all of the time, and that you're probably just going along and then adopting that thought and then believing it as if it's a like real belief, as in taking it in to be that way. It's not necessarily the case.
No, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So it's always to be aware that you don't have to adopt other people's beliefs or expectations of you. It's your choice. So yeah, thank you for that, Nicole.
I think Sean had a hand up as well. Did you, Sean?
I just think something that Victoria was saying about assumptions, something that I really do struggle with, and it's probably linked to assumptions, but people's body language. So where I am at the moment and the journey I am on at the moment, I was with there was something I was involved with a couple of weeks ago, and my performance was significantly affected because of the body language, whether I was assuming correctly or incorrectly. But it became very apparent to me, or certainly how I felt, that this person was not warming to me, or it was involved in a job interview situation.
Right.
And even though I knew what I was saying, I had the belief in my own convictions. I knew what I was saying was correct. They didn't like that. And that really affected me. And I suppose it's all linked to that imposter syndrome and that feeling of self-worth. But I think, again, I don't know whether it's linked to my upbringing, my beliefs, my emotions. It's probably all intertwined. That feeling of, I must not be good enough then.
Yeah.
Or I'm not, maybe arrogant is the wrong word, but I'm not strong enough or disciplined enough to think that okay, that's your opinion, so that's fine. The type of person that I often am, I'm quite susceptible or sensitive to people around me, and I value when I meet people, and so I will take on board perhaps more than I should. I'm not as good at the moment of trying to sift through what I need and what I don't need. I absorb everything.
Yeah.
And I just think, just from what Victoria said, and then following on with Nicole, that is something that, while I try not to assume, I am very sensitive to people's interactions with me.
Yeah, and I think that's partly a natural thing that we all do, is we want to engage with people in a good way. So we're always looking for clues as to what's going on for them, and that could be body language, what they're saying, facial expressions, anything. And sometimes we can attach meaning to it that's not there. So quite a common one is if people fold their arms, people make an assumption that somebody's being defensive, but it could be that they're just feeling cold, or it's just more comfortable for them to sit there like that. So it's good to become aware of that and not actually attach meaning to things, because we're often interpreting things from our own model of the world and not necessarily what's actually going on for them. So that's a good observation, Sean. Thank you. Mark, you got your hand up?
Just a quick one. It's just human nature that, sorry, my air fryer's speaking. It's human nature that you can have a million compliments, and the one comment which is derogatory, you'll focus on that.
Yeah.
You know, and really, it's putting into perspective. You can have a million things which are positive and true and genuine, but we'll focus in on the one derogatory comment, and that's human nature.
Yeah.
So it's not a sign of weakness, or it's the way humans are. It's the way we are, and I guess it's just building that resilience to it, really. I think resilience is so important.
Yeah, and I'll be talking a little bit about that, where we look for things and evidence like that shortly. So yeah, absolutely, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Can I speak?
Yeah, sure. Who's that?
I work in a predominantly female world,
Mhm.
working on menstrual health, and there's one man in this community
Right.
who hasn't really understood that, as the only man, maybe he should stand at the back. And he's been making negative comments, and I know he's wrong, but there's a thing with bullying. He is a bully, where you think maybe the bit of what he's saying is right. Or when people say negative things, it immediately makes you go on the back foot and think, oh, I know rationally they're wrong, but maybe they are a bit right. And that can push you down further.
Yeah, and I'll be talking a bit about boundaries shortly, where it's understanding that and having that belief in yourself that you know that you're right to be able to reject what people are saying to you.
But it's quite difficult, isn't it?
It can be, yeah. But again, you have a choice on whether you accept his opinion or not.
Yes, but deep down you're going, ugh.
Yeah, and so there could be some belief that you have about yourself that's underpinning that, perhaps.
And I think this is a particularly gender thing.
Okay. In what way do you mean?
That as women, we're brought up, taught to that men are usually right and we're wrong. And however strong we are as feminists, there's always that underlying feeling, partly because most of the rulers are men and they're the ones that make decisions and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one belief. I think, fortunately, that's probably something that's not quite so prevalent these days because there are a lot of more stronger women around. But I do take your point that that can be an issue. But how about just rejecting what he says as being complete rubbish and just not believing it?
Oh, I am. I'm not even responding.
Okay, that's great. Good stuff. But thank you for sharing that. Karina.
Yeah, about the body language thing that was mentioned before, I also get affected about that because in my business, I do deal with clients almost on a daily basis. And part of my services is to coach them. And I always get worried that the coaching sessions that they don't enjoy the coaching sessions. And I actually actively look for clues that they're not enjoying. And I ignore the positive signals. And I realize this is me doing it proactively, looking for negative stuff. And I get very affected. And my response to that is trying to over deliver to justify the worth, the value.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's self-sabotaging both myself and the business.
Yeah.
And the second thing that I wanted to say, and I wanted to actually ask this, could this be a cause as well, the stories that you tell yourself? So all my life, I've said about myself that I don't have self-confidence. People around me, they say, no, you come across as being very confident.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my head, no, I'm not self-confident. I don't have this. So I'm wondering if I'm actually conditioning myself to believe that and to act that way.
Yeah, it's actually touching on something that Mark was saying as well, which I'll actually move on to it now because that's while we're actually talking about it. Actually, could I come back to that in a moment because there's something else I just want to run through just to put things in context a little bit before I go on to it. But I will definitely come back to that because it's obviously a common thing that's coming up and I will definitely cover it anyway. Is that okay, Karina?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, so thank you all for sharing all of that. I appreciate you all being honest and vulnerable, so thanks for that. I'm just going to share my screen for a moment because I want to just talk about how we all have our own model of the world. And my recent delegates will be familiar with this diagram, so just if you can just bear with me while I figure out how to share my screen. Oh, there it is, right.
IT is your background, isn't it, Sheila?
Yeah, I know. We're not all perfect. Okay. Ooh. So I'm using Keynote and I've never used it before, so that may have been, all right, here we go. So can everybody see that okay? I'm just gonna have to move your lovely faces out of the way because I can't see exactly what, oh, my mouse has disappeared. That's not helpful. Can everybody see the words external events appear? No. Can you see it now? Okay. Oh, I've got one shaking the head and one nodding. So on the right hand side, there should be external events.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So all the time we're experiencing things around us. So whether that's the environment that we're in, interactions with people, things that we're doing. So there's all sorts of external stuff going on around us. We basically have 5 senses that we can interpret that through. So that could be things that we see, things we hear, things that we touch, or feelings we get, taste or smell. So that's the only way we can experience any of those external events. This is a very quick tour through it, but just to give you an idea. So whilst we have those 5 ways of interpreting or experiencing things, we then on top of that have our own filters that are going on that will then change how we experience those things, which makes up our model of the world. So it could be beliefs that we have about ourselves. If you have a belief that you're not good enough, that can taint everything that you're experiencing. It could be your values. So that's basically things that are important to you. So for example, if living a sustainable life is important to you, you might be very disapproving of people that are very wasteful, as an example. Emotions can have an effect on you. So if you're feeling sad or angry, that can change how you experience the events that are happening around you. Attitudes, which are attached to beliefs, your attitudes towards things can change the events you experience. The energy levels that you have, if you're feeling quite tired, or opposite, if you're feeling full of energy, you can experience things differently. Or even something as simple as your personality traits. So just as a simple example, if somebody's an introvert or an extrovert and they're in a really crowded room, you could have a different experience of what that room feels like to you. So that's just to give you an idea that there's lots of things going on for us that can change our experiences. So if ever you've been to the same event as somebody and you've both had a very different experience, that can help to explain why, because we've all got our own filters and our own model of the world going on. Does that all make sense? So once your brain has done its thing with all of the filters that are going on for you, you will then get a representation internally of what that event means to you and what you're experiencing. That in turn could then influence any emotions that you've got going on. So if you're at a really good party, you're feeling on top of the world, got loads of energy, you're really happy, you could have a really happy representation of that event. And that can then in turn give you some happy emotions. That can then influence your physiology. So you might be very open and have a big smile on your face. So it could change your physiology from that point of view. And that can then influence your behavior. So we've all got all of this going on inside our heads that can interpret what's going on for us. And similarly, your physiology, so your physical state, can actually influence your emotions and how you perceive everything that's going on around you. Okay. So just to prove that, I'm just going to do a quick exercise with people. So I just want to demonstrate something to you. So can everybody, I can't see everybody at the moment, so just bear with me and see if I can change that. I'm not sure I can, but anyway, we'll go with it for now. So can everybody think of something a little bit sad or a bit miserable and adopt the physiology that you'd have if you were feeling sad or miserable? So you might hunch your shoulders down, you might be looking down, you might droop down at the corners. So just think we're still in lockdown, it's nearly Christmas, and if weather's horrible outside, it's a bit miserable. So just have those not so nice thoughts going on. Okay. Now, this might not be so easy for some of you to do, but I'm going to stay sitting down so you can actually see what I'm doing. But so I want you to just shake off that feeling of sadness. We're going to forget all of that now. Okay. So if you can, I'd like you all to stand up. And so I can't see you all on camera, but then I want you to lift your arms up, so you're making a V with your arms, and I want you to look up to the ceiling and put a massive grin on your face so people can see your teeth. And I want you to hold your position exactly as you are. So you stood up nice and straight, arms in the air, and you've got a big grin on your face. And now I want you to try and think those sad things that you were thinking before. Okay. Cool. All right, everybody can relax and sit back down again. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can see your lovely faces. I can't see my mouse. This isn't helping. Oh, right, a button. Okay. Technology is great, isn't it? Great. Did anybody notice that when they were in that position that they couldn't actually think those sad thoughts? Did everybody get that? Yeah. Some nods going on. So that just proves to you that you can influence how you feel by how your physiology is. So if you're feeling a bit miserable, just stick a big grin on your face and see if that makes you feel better. But what it also proves is that how you feel at any time is a choice, because you were putting yourself in a position where you couldn't feel anything but happy. So just bear that in mind, that how you feel is a choice, and you can change how you feel by how you carry yourself. So even if you're just walking down the street and put your shoulders back and your head in the air, it'll instantly make you feel a bit better than if you're looking down at the pavement. So just give that a go. Okay. Great. So have anybody got any questions about, I know I did that very quickly, just run through how we create our own model of the world, but has anybody got any questions about that before I move on? No? Did I see any hands up? No. Okay, great. So right, moving on to how you can overcome and self-sabotage, and how you can adopt some strategies to change that. So the first one I'm going to talk about is self-talk. So it's okay to admit here that you have voices in your head. You're in good company, because I will admit I have voices in my head, so that's all okay. And quite often, I know some people talk to themselves in a way that they wouldn't talk to anybody else. And you can be quite horrible to yourself sometimes with the language that you use, beat yourself up, call yourself nasty names like you're stupid or useless or whatever. And you wouldn't dream of talking to anybody else that way, but somehow we think it's an okay thing to do, to talk to ourselves like that. So it's good to watch out for the language that you're using with yourself, and also to make sure that it's not negative language in particular. And I just want to demonstrate something to you, and anybody who's done any of my workshops before will understand this one. So if I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, what's the first thing that you think of? So I'm guessing it's a pink elephant. Yep. So your brain works in a way that you have to think about the thing that you don't want to think about in order to not think about it. So we've got quite complicated brains going on. So you can start to understand that if you're thinking about things that you don't want, you're actually going to have those things on your mind. So if anybody's ever tried to lose weight or go on a diet, and you're trying to say to yourself, I'm not going to eat chocolate, I'm not going to eat cake, I'm not going to think about chocolate, I'm not going to think about cake, what is it your brain's automatically going to think about? Cake and chocolate, because you're planting that thought in your head. Even though you put a not in front of it, your brain just ignores that bit and just focuses on the word at the end. And this is a great thing as well with kids, because you might start to understand why your kids are doing what you don't want them to do. Yes, Anita, brain is like Google, definitely. So if ever you walk down the street with your kids and you say to them, don't play in the road, what you've basically done is bring the road into their awareness, and they might think, oh, I'll go and run in the road then. So what you can say to them instead is stay on the pavement. So you try to use language as you want it. So say it as you want it, basically. Other things to be aware of is where you keep telling yourself that you can't do something, or telling yourself that you're a failure. So the good news is you never have to fail again, because I'm going to give you a bit of a different way of looking at that. So rather than thinking of being a failure, just look at something as being feedback. And it's just, you found a way of not doing that. So you're just giving yourself permission to not fail, and just giving yourself a bit of feedback onto how to do it differently next time. So how nice is that, that you never have to fail at anything again? Because if you're telling yourself that you failed, you're basically also giving yourself something else to beat yourself up about, which isn't helpful, which I think we've all been guilty of.
Is that when you start then to reinforce it? When once you're telling yourself that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can. The more you tell yourself something bad, the more you're reinforcing it. It works the same way doing something positive as well. Okay. Another common one is when you say to people, oh, don't forget to pick up the washing, or don't forget to collect whatever. You're also planting that thought in people's head to forget it. So just reframe that to remember to go and pick up whatever. So it's just little subtle things that can help support your brain to do things differently. I even had a friend of mine who's got a daughter who's very bright academically, but she struggles a little bit with spelling. And my friend said to me, she's brilliant, and her daughter was in earshot. She said, but her one failing is spelling. So I winced a little bit, because I understand this stuff. So I just said, could I just make a suggestion, and could you say to her that she finds spelling less easy instead? And she looked at me a bit confused, so I explained. But if you tell somebody that they're a failure at something, it doesn't really leave them anywhere to go. and they might adopt that as being a done deal forever and that's it, you can't change it. So by saying that she found spelling less easy, not only does it sound a bit nicer, but it also leaves her with a possibility that things could change and that she could improve. So just subtle little things like that. So the first thing to, sorry, Vicky, did you want to say
I
something?
was just going to say, it's positive reframing is what I've used before. And similar to what you said to your friend's daughter, my daughter was exactly the same about a test that she had, and she's got used to me saying this sort of thing, and she got 9 out of 20. Sorry, she got 9 wrong basically, and didn't get 20. And she said, I got 11, and she said it like that, and I only got 9 wrong. Better way of saying how she had not done it exactly. I think it's the positive reframing and teaching ourselves how we could say that to support rather than to harm. And I think we do that with that negative self-talk all the time, don't we? So
absolutely. Yeah. So the first thing to do is to start to notice where you're talking to yourself negatively. So this is for everybody. Thank you, Victoria. Because once you start to become aware of it, because if we've done it all of our lives, it can just become a normal pattern of behavior, just something we do every day and you don't take any notice of it. So if you start to be aware of where you're not speaking to yourself in a very nice way, you can start to then think about how you can talk to yourself differently. So just be aware of if you're using those negatives like I'm useless or I can't do this, just try reframing it, as Victoria was saying, reframe it into something positive.
Or it's hard, this is too hard.
Yeah, or if you say something is difficult, you're just going to adopt that idea.
It's difficult.
Yeah, or if you say to yourself, I can't do it yet, or it's just less easy for me at the moment, then that gives you that possibility that you could do something differently. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Less easy is my new favourite word.
Good. It's 2 words, but yes.
we hear it a lot, don't we, Sheetal?
Yeah.
Both of you use that loads.
You had that a lot in the week that we were training, but yes.
Even now, because we've got a WhatsApp group and we hear it quite a lot on a daily basis.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. Glad that you're taking it all on board. That's really good. Okay. So then beliefs is another big one. And beliefs that we have about ourselves, whether they're good or bad, they're often formed when we're children. I'm not going to go into the technicalities of it, but usually before the age of 7, because our brains are like little sponges before the age of 7, and we haven't got a logical way to reject anything that's said to us. So we can quite often adopt beliefs of what people tell us just as being gospel because we've got no other mechanism to disagree with it. It could be later on in life as well, but quite often it's before the age of 7. And that can come from our parents. Our parents might tell us that we're stupid or useless and we adopt that as a belief. It could be that we're comparing ourselves or other people are comparing us to our siblings or our schoolmates, and we start to doubt ourselves because of that. It could be teachers. I know I've had a teacher in my past say something not great. And it was even at the age of 16. So I'd done my O-levels. Yes, I am that old, and was just starting my A-levels. And we had our deputy head was actually also a maths teacher. And I'd actually failed my maths O-level, but because my teacher knew I was good enough to have passed it, he pushed me through for resits and allowed me to start doing my A-levels. But our teacher went around the class and asked everybody what grade they'd got at O-level, so he could predict what grade they'd get at A-level. So he was going around the class and he got to me. So not only was I humiliated that I had to actually say I'd failed my O-level in front of a whole classroom full of people. So he's basically going around, you'll get a C, you'll get a B. Got to me and I said I'd got a D at maths, and he went, oh, you'll fail. So instantly, my first week on my A-levels, I was told that I was going to fail. Not surprisingly, I didn't pass my maths A-level, but there's probably a lot of other stuff going on, but that obviously undermined my belief in myself. There's lots of people around us who are in positions where they should be looking after our best interests, but they don't always, and it may not always be intentional either. Okay, so the thing about beliefs, so this is coming back to the point that Karina and Mark were making, that we look for proof and we're always looking for evidence to prove ourselves, basically, even if that's not in our best interests. And there's a technical term for this, and it's a natural inbuilt thing in all of our brains. And the technical term, which I should ask one of my 3 students for. Anybody going to volunteer it? No? Okay. It's called a reticular activating system, but I'll call it a RAS for short. Nicole's having a look.
That's it, Shuna, I remember now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an inbuilt thing for survival, that when we lived in caves, it allowed you to look for things and patterns that you've seen before. So that if you start to see what a saber-toothed tiger's footprints look for, you're going to be more aware of looking for that. Or if there's a particular berry that would be good for you to eat, so there'll be a lot of it, you might start to recognize what the leaves are looking for. So you're more aware of looking for those leaves in the hedgerows. So your brain's actually designed to do that sort of thing. However, that can also work against you, because once you start focusing on something, you're then going to be looking for evidence to actually back that up. So if you've got a belief that you're not good enough, you're actually going to be looking for evidence to prove yourself and back that up. So just knowing that's a natural function of our brain, you can start to be more aware of it and understand when that's happening. So does that kind of make sense? Does that answer your question, Karina? Yeah. So the first thing to do is start examining the beliefs that you have about yourself. So where you're looking for evidence that you're not good enough or whatever, start to have a think about the beliefs that you've got about yourself, because it might be the first time that you've actually thought about that. And also have a think about where that's come from. So has anybody got any examples of where that might be happening for them that they're happy to share? Karina?
Oh, sorry, it's going to be me again. I think I'm a high achiever, and all my life I've had very high standards, and I've had examples around me. So my sister, also high achiever, she's older than me, so she set the standards, and I had to live up to expectations. And there was always a little bit of pressure that I have to be at the same level, and nobody was actually thinking, what's your capacity, what's the best version of yourself, what's your potential.
Yeah,
it was always a predetermined thing.
mm-hmm.
And I had to live up to the expectation. So I think that's why I always felt the pressure to be good, to be excellent.
Yeah.
And I always believed about myself that, you know, I'm not good enough, I'm not confident enough. Yeah. And I worked hard, and I actually did achieve.
I know. Exam results and qualifications.
Yeah. But internally, I've always felt like a fraud.
Okay. So,
and looking for validation that I am that.
Yeah. Okay. And would it be okay to ask you a few questions?
Yeah.
So the expectations for that, where did they come from?
There wasn't something actually said to me, so it was more like internal pressure, because, so for example, in my upbringing, my family they all made big sacrifices for me and my sister to go to have a good education, to come to England, for example. They supported us financially, and I always felt like I have to make them proud, to never upset them, always achieve things. So it was more like an internal pressure than something that they actually said, something imposed by them.
So it was sorry to interrupt. So it was an expectation that you put on yourself.
Yeah. And because I had around me, I had examples, as I said, like my sister, I thought, oh, I had to be like her, if not better. But then I would never actually celebrate that. I would never actually acknowledge that, hey, you've achieved a lot. And no, and even when I actually become aware of that, it's for a very short period of time. Okay, yeah, what's next? What's next to achieve?
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is all coming from inside of you.
Yeah.
And when you're doing all of this stuff and the studying and the working and everything, are you always doing your best?
Yeah, because I can't sleep if I don't. If I'm not at peace with myself.
Yeah.
And I've been like this since I was little, and so throughout my academic life, it's been like that whenever I was studying. Now in my business, if I feel like I haven't given 100% of myself, I don't feel good about it. It's like I dwell on things and I keep thinking about it. And
yeah, I'll come back to you in a second, Nicole, sorry. So Karina, So if you're setting yourself expectations, and I can't remember who it was who said it earlier, whether it was Anita or Liz, or was it Mark? Somebody was saying about setting yourself, it was Mark, wasn't it? Setting yourself unrealistic expectations. So if those expectations are never going to be achieved, then you're never going to be satisfied or feel
And I
happy
am
with
like
yourself.
that. I'm never satisfied. Even now in my business, I'm never satisfied. I always feel like, oh, I should have done better. I could improve that. I could work harder. I could make better use of my time. How can others do it? And what am I doing all day? And I actually do work a lot.
I know you work hard, because I know you, but I just invite you to think about, are you setting yourself completely unrealistic expectations, and whether
Probably,
that's helpful to you.
probably. If I actually look at my to-do list, it's never ending. So I never actually get, so I never actually get that moment of, today was really good. I ticked everything on my to-do list. And I know we've worked together on this, and I know you did say find an achievement every day, something to be grateful for, something to celebrate. And I sometimes do that. But then what I do is, okay, great, you've achieved that, tick. What's next?
Okay.
Or I look at, okay, you've achieved that.
I'm just going to do a quick survey with everybody on the call. So does anybody on the call manage to tick everything off their to-do list every day? No. Oh, Liz does. Are you saying you do manage to tick everything off your to-do list?
I tick everything off my to-do list in a day. I wouldn't go to bed unless it was done.
Okay.
So if I've got stuff to do.
Is that for today? It's not necessarily everything on your to-do list.
I have no, it's every day I have a to-do list. I don't roll anything over to the next day. This is the list that I do today. You'll stay up until midnight. It's done. Then you put that to bed, and then you go to the next list. So I wouldn't sleep or rest unless I'd done that to-do list in that day. And I can't disappoint people. So if I've got a task that's been rolling over, that'll mither me that much that I might as well just crack it out and do it anyway.
Okay, fair enough. But is your to-do list quite realistic to get done within a day?
I feel like I set myself I think it's more about my belief in myself. I genuinely think I'm good at setting myself targets, and I don't seem to have a problem with like time management and stuff. So I generally, I think I set good, realistic targets for the day and what I want to achieve in that week.
Okay.
I think
that's good. Thank you for that. So Karina, going back to your to-do list then.
It's a long list, and
a realistic list to get done within a day?
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably not, but then I force myself to do it.
Okay, so how about being kinder to yourself and setting yourself a realistic to-do list?
But I'm a superwoman and I should be doing everything, right? That's my belief. That's my,
Okay.
So I should,
But can you see how, in a way, you're setting yourself up to fail?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And like I tried different strategies. Wake up earlier. Why do you need a whole hour for lunch? You can do it in half an hour and go back to work.
But then there's a balance that comes in between self-care and looking after yourself and doing too much.
But hey, priorities. What's the priority today? Come on, you can do that
be a priority.
Yeah.
Okay. But have a think about that. Maybe do your to-do list differently or prioritize it differently. I'll come to you in a second, Anita, but Nicole's had her hand up for a while, if that's okay.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more about that concept of putting the expectation on yourself and linking to that model of the world, Shuna. So the model of the world and the external event, and you said that things happen between the age of 0 and 7.
Yeah.
So although, for example, Christina can't remember, she says, I've done it since I was a child, I can't remember why I do this. Would there have been some like subliminal messages she was getting from people around her to create that model of the world, and then that stuck with her? Is that what we do to ourselves? Because I can relate to Karina and what she's saying.
Yeah, basically. Because if you, I'll have talked to you about this already, so you'll know it, but if you have a belief about something at some point in the past, or to have a belief about anything, you have to make a decision that belief is true. Whatever that belief is, even if it's the world is flat, you would have had to make a decision at some point that belief is true for you. So whether you're aware of it or not, there will be some point in the past that you've made a decision that is true. And you may not be consciously aware of it, because if it's something that happens when you're quite small, it could be something that's happened quite naturally over time and you're not actually aware of when that happened. But there will be a point that was decided on. Does that help answer your question? Okay.
So to get yourself out of it, you'd ask yourself, is it true for you now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this belief serving you?
Yeah, firstly, is it serving you? Secondly, if you look back on where it had come from in the past, you can reflect as an adult whether it's actually true or not. And you also can ask yourself what it's costing you to have that belief.
Yeah, that's
so is it costing you your health, or is it costing you success? Is it costing you getting into a relationship? Whatever that is, and just then ask yourself, is having that belief worth what it's costing you? And you can then make a choice about whether to let it go or not.
Yeah, okay. That's quite a logical process, really, isn't it?
There's always an alternative, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And our beliefs aren't always based on logic. That's the interesting thing, that it can be you've just adopted it because that's what you were told at the time, or something you imagine or read into a situation. So it may not actually be true.
It goes back to that concept of the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
But it almost like it's so automatic. It becomes so automatic that you don't consciously challenge that.
Yeah.
You should challenge that belief. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It just seems a natural part of you, so you don't always question what's going on.
Is it because we want to hold on to that belief?
Because we want to hold on to being right, I think, is behind a lot of it. And this is why we look for evidence to back it up, so we can prove that the belief that we have is correct and right. Right, or do you want to have the thing that you're not getting because of that belief?
Especially if we've held on to the belief for so long, it could be actually a little bit painful to let it go and think, what have I been doing all these years? Like, why have I been?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Anita, I think you had your hand up. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, I was going to say the job I have is I have a to-do list most days, but I get left field things throughout the day coming at me all of the time. So very often I don't complete my to-do list, and I'm an absolute, I don't want to let anybody down either, but I've had to learn. I'm 60 years old. It's took me a long time to get there, but is a business going to fall over? What 3 things have I got to do? Or is that project going to fall over if I don't do this? And I have to look at it like that.
Yeah.
Because if I did everything on my to-do list, I'd probably be dead in a week. And the thing is, Karina, that what I think is as well, what you've got to be really careful of is you could use all your energy up tonight, work till 1 o'clock in the morning to get something done because you feel you have to. And at 7 a.m. or whatever tomorrow, the most urgent thing you ever had in your life comes along and you ain't got the energy to do it. And then what are you going to do? So it really, for me, to be able to say, I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Let me have a look at it and I'll tell you when I can do that. And it's a really hard thing to do because you want to be seen as perfect. And I get that because I can't even tell you my background. I might tell you at some point, but you don't want to know it. But I get you completely, Karina. In fact, I was going to say, do you want a job? But you will burn yourself out if you just
absolutely.
And apart from the not wanting to be wrong, it's also a big release. Hey, I haven't got to do that. No, so anyway,
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that, Anita.
Thank you for this. Thank you for this, Anita. I do know what you mean, because recently it has affected me physically as well. Like I get headaches, and I have a feeling it's because I put a lot of pressure on myself and I work very hard and I don't take breaks like I should. And so I do get burnout.
And it's also a thing to be aware of now that you're working for yourself. That
where are the limits?
That you
and working from home.
Yeah, absolutely. And also ask yourself, are you doing your best? And if you're doing your best, that's as much as you can do. because you are not Superwoman, no matter how hard you try to be Superwoman. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Right, just to move on then, if you examine just to recap on examining the beliefs that you hold and whether they're serving you and whether they're actually true, if you look back at them, and whether you're ready to let go of that, you have a choice to let go of those beliefs. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. So is everybody okay if we run over by a few minutes? Because I'm just want to make sure we get everything in that we can. Is that okay? By about 10 minutes, is that all okay for everybody? Okay. So another key thing is to start focusing on what you want, because oftentimes we focus on the things that we don't want. So we think about what could go wrong, what could turn out badly, and we often only ever focus on things being negative then, rather than focusing on what we actually do want. So remembering what I just said about the reticular activating system, the RAS, that it's always looking for evidence to support whatever it is that you're focusing on. So if you're always focusing on things turning out badly, guess what will happen? You'll find evidence to support things turning out badly. So a good thing to do is to flip that around and start focusing on how you want to go things right and how you do want things to turn out. There's a quote from Tony Robbins, so I'm sure most of you are familiar with Tony Robbins, that where focus goes, energy flows. So not only is your focus going there and then your attention and everything, but you'll be putting all of your energy into that focus of things turning out badly. So if you're putting all of that energy into something that could be negative, that's not going to be a good thing for you either. So it's a much healthier thing to do, to put your focus into things turning out in a good way. So one thing I want to share with you, I think a couple of you may have this already, but there's an audio recording I've got here that I'm just going to post the link into the chat for you, so that if you want to download it, just copy that and download it. But I've created an audio to help people start to focus on things turning out as they want them to. So this is really useful if you've got any events coming up. So whether it's an interview or you're doing a presentation at work, or if you've got a date coming up, or anything that you've got that you want to have a positive outcome for, if you start listening to this audio track, it's a kind of visualization hypnosis track. It'll help you start to visualize how you want things to actually turn out. And some people that I've shared this with and they've used it, they're actually quite amazed that things do turn out exactly as they visualize them. So it does work. So I'd recommend using that. So feel free to download that if you want to. And anxiety. So this is very closely linked to focusing on what you want. So anxiety seems to be a bit of a growing thing at the moment, not wanting to dismiss it, but it seems to be quite fashionable for people to say that they've got an anxiety disorder or something like that. But if you break anxiety down to its simplest form, it basically is just fear of the future. So it's just fear of something going wrong. So if you're anxious about something, it's because you're focusing on things going wrong rather than, so it links back into the previous one of focusing on what you want to happen and focusing on things turning out. And the other thing about the future is, so can anybody tell me anything about the future that would play into that anybody can think of? No. So the future doesn't actually exist. So it only exists in here.
Yeah,
it only exists in your mind. So it's not real. So you're worrying about something that hasn't happened yet and only exists in your imagination in here. So you again have a choice on what you want to focus on, whether you want to focus on things just going wrong all the time, or if you want to focus on things turning out as you want them to. So again, that audio track that I just sent the link for, if somebody says that not working. Is that Karen?
Yes, we don't see the visualization link.
Oh, it's all right. Thank you, Mark. I think you're trying to point that out. It's all right. I've just sent it to Mark. Lucky thing. I'll try that again and send it to everybody. There you go. Hopefully everybody can see it now. Thank you, Karen. Okay. Anybody got any questions so far? No. Okay. So the last couple of things I want to talk about. Does everybody understand what I mean by boundaries? That we all have boundaries that we use with people or we don't use with people. Yeah, no. Okay. So boundaries, if you think of boundaries like a fence, and it's whether you allow people across that boundary or not, or if you allow their questions or intentions, anything across those boundaries or not. And it's quite often something that I deal with my clients, that they struggle with actually enforcing their boundaries. And that's usually when you find it difficult to say no to people. So if you're always saying yes to people, that could be that you're not enforcing your boundaries. Or if you're living up to other people's expectations and not your own expectations. So that can be, again, a sign that you're not enforcing your own boundaries. And I had a client who was struggling to find a relationship. And one of the reasons that we discovered was that she was adopting a lot of expectations from her parents. So even though it was unspoken, she knew that her parents were disapproving of people that were divorced. So if she got together with somebody who was divorced, she would actually end up sabotaging the relationship and getting out of it because she knew that her parents would disapprove. And I thought it's quite a sad place to be, that you're living your life through your parents' expectations. But I know a lot of people actually do that. So it's about acknowledging what you want out of life. And the way I also describe it is that any interactions that you have with people, you want them to be a win-win relationship. And if you're always saying yes to people, or you're living to people's expectations, you're going to be in a win-lose relationship and you'll be on the losing side. So I was hoping we'd have time to do this tonight, but we're overrunning a little bit. So I'm going to give you this as an exercise to take away with you. But one thing that you can do is write yourself a list of how you want people to treat you. So whether that's with respect, honesty, loyalty, whatever it is, write yourself a list of how you want people to treat you. And then the first step, I do a lot of work with clients over this, but just very briefly, what to then do is to start noticing when people aren't treating you like that and you're allowing it to happen. And there's a favourite author of mine, Stephen Covey, who wrote the book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said that he teaches people how to treat him by what he will allow. So it's basically, once you've established how you want people to treat you, so your boundaries are basically that list of how you want people to treat you. And so you need to start teaching people how to treat you by what you will allow. And that's not to say you become a monster overnight and start pushing back on everybody and being aggressive with everybody if they don't respect you every time, because sometimes it's about choosing your battles as well. But even if after the event you just start to become aware of it and you can start to think about how you could say things differently, even that will help. So that I'd give you that as an exercise. So write a list of how you want people to treat you, and then start to notice when people aren't treating you like that, and start to think about what you could say to them, even if it's after the event. And I liken it to a bit like developing a new muscle, that you need to flex it and build it up over time. So don't feel that you need to be perfect at this straight away. It can take a bit of practice and a bit of time to get that sorted. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far? So we seem to be rushing through the last couple of bits. Okay.
I've been asking some questions in the chat box. I didn't want to interrupt.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go backwards up the list. Yes, Julie, it's an interesting question, because the past and the present, the past and the future don't actually exist except in our minds. So it took me quite a while to get my head around this, but the only bit of time that actually exists is now, because that's what we're experiencing. The future is just what we imagine to happen, and the past only exists in our memories. So yeah, in a nutshell, if you want to break it down to that level, yep, time is fake. Does that answer your question, Julie?
I think I would probably need to have a further discussion with you more about that, but
yeah,
to understand, have a better understanding.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, that's cool. But yeah, it's a difficult concept to talk about in a very brief space of time. Okay, Valeria's gone. So again, Julie, it's what your perception is of whether your best is good enough. If you've given your absolute all into something, to my mind, that would be your best. So if you're setting yourself unrealistic expectations to achieve something, then I would examine the beliefs that you have about that. And I think that probably ties into the not feeling good enough. So it's what you quantify as being your best. And Julie, if you want to chat about this more, I'm going to put a link in the chat in a moment. So if anybody wants to book into my diary to talk about anything further, they can do. So if that would be useful for you, we can do that, Julie.
Okay, thank you. Do you have what your fees are?
The first conversation I'd have is completely for free. So I'm not even going to talk about fees or programs or anything, because I just really would like to welcome her to have a chat with anybody. So I can put a link, I'll do that now actually, I'll put a link in the chat. So if anybody does want to book in and talk about anything that we've covered tonight, so if there's something you didn't feel comfortable asking a question about within the group, or if there's anything you want to talk about further, then please book into my diary and I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you. Okay. Okay, so just quickly then, would anybody like to share what one big insight they've had about tonight and one action that they're going to take after this? So anybody who's not shared anything so far, would they like to share an insight or share an action they're going to take? Yeah, Victoria. Sorry, Sean. Yeah, Sean.
I think it's a few things that you've said I know, but I don't know, which I understand it and I am aware of it, but sometimes when somebody else says it, it becomes explicit. And there's been a number of things that are areas that I've been aware of, but really haven't given myself the headspace to really reflect on it. But I think one of the main areas that I want to focus on after this tonight has been the fact that the future doesn't exist. Because whether it's being Scottish and the glass isn't there, it's been pinched, but it's that idea that I know that the thing or the event or the object that I'm worrying about, when it actually does come to fruition, it was never as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's just keeping that in my mind, that it is in my imagination, because actually I can't predict what that future is going to be. So why am I going to worry about it? And I managed to do something today where I put it to the back of my mind. I thought, don't bother about it. So tonight that's reaffirmed something that I got there myself.
Yeah.
Through a very painful, bumpy, windy, unpleasant journey. But to actually have it articulated in the way that you've done tonight is a much more manageable mantra, if you like, for myself.
Great.
So that's certainly something that I'm going to either write on a post-it note and have dotted about the house.
The future
It might be, I'll get it tattooed somewhere. But I certainly need to have that in the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, and it's quite empowering when you can think of it from that point of view, because it no longer has that hold over you that it had before. So yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Sean. Sorry, somebody's put in the chat, where's my diary? I'll share it again, but there's a link that I'm going to put in the chat. So it's Go Once Hub 60-minute breakthrough. So if you click on that link, it's an electronic version of my diary, and you can book into any free slots in there. I'd welcome anybody who wants to do that. Mark, you had your hand up to share something. So is it an insight or an action you're going to take after tonight?
I think just not setting myself up to fail by unrealistically trying to think I'm going to have 50 clients before Christmas Day, because it's only 4 weeks away.
Yeah. Yeah, it is about being realistic about things, definitely.
Well, especially under present circumstances with COVID, and it just does complicate it a little bit. So it's setting realistic, which we've talked about before, our smartest goals. It's being, and because otherwise you just end up being disappointed.
Yeah, Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Because like you said, it just gives you something else to beat yourself up about, that you haven't actually achieved it. And a good way to look at that is to, I think this is something I was messaging to Nicole the other day, is when somebody has got goals like that, start to break down what action you can actually take that is realistic. So how many conversations can you have with people a day? How many of those people are likely to say yes? How much time have you got in your diary? That kind of thing. It can help you then sort of set something that's a bit more realistic.
But I was procrastinating a bit, but the two girls have been great, Sheetal and Elle. So we have a chat once or twice, about every 2 weeks. And Nicole was going on about, so you said that you're going to make contact with 6 people. When are you going to do it? When?
Yeah, that's good. That's
but it was great because it was not, and I've ended up with 2 clients this week.
Brilliant.
So
that's excellent. Well done.
Yeah, thanks to them, partly to them. This is great.
They're good at nagging. Yeah, I can imagine.
Mainly Nicole, I would say. In a good way. In a good way. She gave me a kick as well, really, which was good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I've just noticed Rachel put something in the chat, so thank you for sharing that. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. I think a lot of people have been pushed out of their comfort zone this year with everything that's going on. So good that you've kept going and you've turned up here tonight. So that's, I hope you got something useful out of it. And good to see that you'll be adopting that phrase of less easy. So well done. Great. And nice to see you. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? When you reference your diary, is that the same as a schedule?
Yeah, sorry, yes, the same as this schedule, yeah. So if you click on that link, there'll be some dates appear that you can book yourself into.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, and I hope to speak to you soon then. So thank you all for your time tonight. Sorry that's been a bit rushed at the end, but that's really great because it's a sign that you've been asking questions and interacting, which is what I love to do. So thank you for all your contributions. So I plan to run these free workshops on a monthly basis. I won't be doing one in a month because it will be Christmas Day. Early in January, I'll be publishing a new date, and I'll be doing one soon, but the workshop will be early January. And next time I plan to be focusing a bit more and going a lot more in depth around anxiety. So if that's something that would be helpful, then I'd love to see you there as well. So thank you. And like I said, if anybody wants to have a chat with me about anything afterwards, then please feel free to book in, and I'm more than happy to speak to you. I look forward to it.
I just wanted to show you this about anxiety.
Great. Is it useful? Have you started reading that?
Oh, I finished it in a day, because Superwoman, I have to do it.
Obviously, yeah. So that's fair enough.
And then I made Trello boards on how to actually action on it.
Okay. I like Trello boards. I'm getting into those myself. Thank you, Karen. So you're saying that you're postponing deadlines and deadlines even, and imposter syndrome stood out. So yeah, imposter syndrome is a big thing for a lot of people. A lot of people carry around that burden of thinking that they're a fake, and if you think about it, I was talking to this about somebody else. If you think about the fact that it's quite common and that you're in a room full of people and you're thinking that, just have a think about how many other people are probably thinking the same thoughts. And maybe that will help you understand. So where we're thinking and assuming what other people are thinking, their body language might actually be an indication that they're not feeling particularly confident. So it might appear that they're being standoffish to you, but that could just be a sign that they're not feeling confident. So it's different. It's good to get a different perspective on what we think people are thinking, that it might actually be exactly what you're thinking. So try that one out as well. Yeah, I hope to speak to you too soon, Karen. But yeah, it's quite often interesting what we use to beat ourselves up with when we're all functioning perfectly as human beings, and we just need to give ourselves a little bit of credit sometimes that we're actually doing a good job. So thank you for all turning up tonight. Has anybody else got any questions before we wrap up? No.
Just thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I hope you've all got something useful from tonight. Like
thank you.
It was a bit rushed, but
Oh.
Thank you. So look forward to seeing you all again soon. Sorry, did somebody else have their hand up then? I just saw a hand flash.
Thank you.
No, okay, that's great. So thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it, and all of your questions and all of your positive energy. See you again soon. All right.
Shana.
Thanks then. Bye.
Bye.